Welcome to the Health Headliner podcast by Tudu Digital. Our content is informational only and not medical advice. Please consult your provider. Now, let's dive into today's headlines.
Okay, so get this right. 90%. 90%.
Wow.
That's wild, right? That's the proportion of cancer deaths around the world that aren't caused by the original tumor,
Oh, wow.
but by it spreading to other parts of the body. Metastasis.
Right.
It's a, kind of scary statistic. But what if something simple as aspirin could, help stop that spread?
Well, that is exactly what we're going to be looking at today, a brand new study that looks at how aspirin might interfere with metastasis, how cancer spreads. We're going to look at the evidence and what it might mean for preventing this really critical stage of cancer, how it progresses. We've got a recent health news report about it, and of course, the original study itself.
And our goal, straightforward. We want to understand from these sources the specific ways that aspirin might actually prevent cancer from spreading. And we're going to break it down so it makes sense, so it's useful for you.
Okay, so to really get this study right, we need to understand just how hard it is to deal with metastasis. Okay, so doctors, they can usually treat the initial tumor, right?
Right.
But then you get these tiny, tiny groups of cancer cells that have already traveled to other parts of the body. And those are called micrometastases, and they're a huge problem.
Micrometastases.
Yeah, but here's the thing. At that early stage, they're actually really vulnerable to the immune system because they haven't built up those defenses, the stuff that the original tumor uses to, hide from the immune system.
Oh, interesting. So they're vulnerable. So, if we could boost the immune system so we could get rid of these new cancer cells, maybe we could actually stop metastasis before it even starts.
Exactly.
So that's where aspirin comes in, right?
Yeah.
Because we've seen these big studies that show that people who take low-dose aspirin regularly, it seems like they have a lower risk of metastasis for a lot of different types of cancer, actually.
Right. And there are even some studies that show that people without metastasis, when they're initially diagnosed, they had lower rates of dying from cancer if they were taking aspirin. There was one really interesting finding. With colorectal cancer, aspirin seemed to work best in tumors that had a lot of this thing called human leukocyte antigen class 1.
Yep.
Think of it like a signal on the cancer cells. That tells the immune system, hey, I'm infected, come get me.
Like a little flag.
Exactly. And the fact that aspirin seemed to work better in those cases suggests that, the immune system was actually doing its job better, recognizing and attacking those cells.
That makes sense.
Wow.
Okay, so to understand how aspirin might be doing all this, we need to talk about these things called cyclooxygenase enzymes.
Right, cyclooxygenase or COX enzymes.
And there are two main types, right? COX1 and COX2.
Exactly. COX1 is found in most of the tissues in our bodies, including platelets, which are, those cells in our blood that help with clotting.
Yeah.
COX1 is really important for making something called thromboxane A2.
Thromboxane A2, got it.
Now, COX2, it's mostly active when there's inflammation going on.
Okay.
But here's the key thing. When you take low-dose aspirin regularly, it mainly targets COX1 in platelets. And platelets, unlike other cells, they can't make more COX1 once aspirin's blocked it.
So low-dose aspirin is blocking COX1 in platelets, which means less thromboxane A2. Interesting. So what was the big idea these researchers were testing?
They thought that thromboxane A2 from platelets might actually be suppressing the immune system, specifically T cells, which are a type of white blood cell that's, really important for fighting off infections and cancer.
Right, T cells.
So their idea was that maybe aspirin's helping prevent metastasis by lowering thromboxane A2 levels, which basically frees up the T cells to do their job and attack those cancer cells that are trying to spread.
Aspirin unleashes the immune system. I like it.
Yeah.
Okay, the study also mentions this gene called ARHGEF1.
Right.
What's that all about?
So these researchers, they've been looking at genes that might be involved in metastasis. They did this big genetic screen using mice, and they found this gene, ARHGEF1. When they messed with this gene in the mice, it actually reduced the spread of melanoma, that's a type of skin cancer, to the lungs.
Okay, so ARHGEF1 is connected to metastasis somehow.
Yeah.
But how does it relate to the T cells we were just talking about?
Well, ARHGF1 is mostly active in blood cells. So in this new study, they turned off the ARHGF1 gene specifically in the T cells of mice. And guess what? Turning off ARHGF1 just in the T cells significantly reduced the spread of both melanoma and lung cancer to the lungs, just like when they messed with it in all the tissues.
So ARHGF1 is doing something important in T cells. That affects metastasis. What were those T cells doing differently when they didn't have ARHGF1?
Well, the T cells without ARHGF1 were way more active at the sites where the cancer was trying to spread. They were producing more of these signaling molecule cytokines. They're essential for a good immune response. And the T cells also showed fewer signs of exhaustion, which is when T cells basically get tired and less effective. Specifically, these T cells without ARHGEF1 had more cells that could make multiple important cytokines at the same time, like interferon gamma, interleukin-2, and tumor necrosis factor.
Wow, they were busy.
Right. They also had lower levels of these proteins that are like, signs of exhaustion markers, like programmed cell death protein 1 and TOX. And this increased activity, it was seen in both regular T cells and in T cells that were specifically targeting the tumor.
Okay, so it sounds like ARHGF1 might normally be like holding T cells back, especially when they're trying to fight cancer spreading. So how do they link this ARHGF1 to the thromboxane A2?
So they looked at how the activity of ARHGF1 in T cells is controlled, and they found that a stable form of thromboxane A2 could actually suppress T cell activation in the lab. And this suppression really depended on ARHGF1 being there in the T cells. So it turns out thromboxane A2 was working by binding to its receptor on the T cells. And when they blocked this receptor, or got rid of ARHGF1, the T cells became resistant to the suppressive effects of thromboxane A2.
Okay, so thromboxane A2 is sending a signal to the T cells, and ARHGF1 is part of how the T cell responds to that signal, which ends up making the T cell less active. But how does that signal actually work inside the T cell?
Well, what they found is that thromboxane A2, working through ARHGF1, it actually limits the activity of these important signaling pathways inside the T cell. These pathways involve these proteins called kinases, like S6 and ERK, which are essential for T cell activation and proliferation when they get signals through their T cell receptor. So it seems like ARHG1 activates another protein called RHOA, and this RHOA then inhibits these kinase pathways, maybe by affecting another molecule called PTM.
So thromboxane A2 through ARHGF1 and then RHOA is basically turning off the T cell's ability to become fully active and multiply when it encounters cancer cells. Okay, so what about aspirin? How did they test its role in all this?
They did experiments in mice. When they gave the mice a substance that acts like thromboxane A2, metastasis increased. But when they treated control mice with aspirin, metastasis went down.
Interesting.
But here's the really important part. Aspirin didn't reduce metastasis in mice that didn't have ARHGEF1 in their T cells.
So aspirin needs ARHGEF1 to do its thing.
Exactly. They also saw that aspirin treatment increased the ability of T cells to activate those kinase signaling pathways we were talking about.
Okay, so we've got this whole new pathway for how cancer spread might be controlled. What are the big implications of this?
Well, this study shows us this brand new pathway where thromboxane A2 from platelets is suppressing the immune system's ability to fight cancer from spreading. And it does this by acting on T cells through the ARHGEF1 protein. It's a whole new pathway of immunosuppression in the context of metastasis.
So this is why aspirin might have the effect on metastasis that we've seen in other studies.
Right. The findings give us a real biological explanation for why aspirin might help prevent metastasis. It inhibits the production of thromboxane A2, which is essentially taking the brakes off the T cells so they can be more effective at attacking and getting rid of those cancer cells that are trying to spread.
This is exciting. This could lead to some cool new ways to prevent and treat metastatic cancer.
Absolutely. This could lead to new, more targeted therapies that are specifically designed to prevent metastasis. Instead of inhibiting COX broadly, like aspirin does, future therapies could focus on manipulating this thromboxane A2 RHGEF1 pathway, which could mean treatments that are more effective or maybe have fewer side effects than aspirin.
That's great. Could this research also tell us why aspirin hasn't been equally effective in all the studies and for all types of cancers?
That's a great question. And yeah, I think the study might offer some clues. Remember how we talked about that study with colorectal cancer where aspirin's benefit seemed to be linked to human leukocyte antigen class 1 expression? Well, maybe biomarkers related to this thromboxane A2 ARHGEF1 pathway could help us figure out which people are most likely to benefit from aspirin to prevent metastasis.
That makes sense. Of course, we always have to think about the limitations of any study.
Yeah.
What are some things we should keep in mind about these findings?
Sure. So This research was mainly done using mouse models. Mouse models are super valuable for understanding biology, but the findings still need to be confirmed in humans to make sure they apply to us. And they mostly focused on melanoma and lung cancer. It'll be important to see if this pathway and aspirin's effect are the same across different types of cancer.
Yeah.
You know, metastasis is really complicated. A lot of factors are involved, not just the immune system. This study sheds light on one important part of it, but it's not the whole story.
I'd love to hear what an expert in metastasis would say about this research. What do you think?
I think an expert would be really excited about this study. It connects a lot of things we've seen before. It strengthens the idea that aspirin might play a role in preventing cancer by showing a specific mechanism, a link between platelets and the immune system and how cancer spreads. They might also talk about how this fits into the bigger picture of prostanoids. Those are molecules that play roles in cancer. We already know that some prostanoids can help tumors avoid the immune system. This study helps us see where thromboxane A2 fits in.
And what kind of research questions do you think this study raises?
Oh, tons. For example, how does this thromboxane A2 ARHGEF1 pathway affect T-cell exhaustion? And how does it affect the development of long-term immune memory against cancer cells?
Yeah, interesting.
They might also look into whether ARHGF1 does other things in the immune system besides this pathway. And of course, the most important thing would be to do clinical trials in humans to really make sure this all holds up and see how we can use this knowledge to actually help prevent and treat cancer.
This is really promising research. It could change how we understand and prevent cancer from spreading. What's one last thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Well, think about it. Aspirin, a drug that's easy to get, might actually help prevent cancer from spreading. That's huge.
Yeah.
So what do we need to do next to make sure patients benefit from this? What kind of clinical trials do we need? What biomarkers should we be looking for? There's so much more to learn.
Absolutely. And to our listeners, if you're wondering about your own risk for cancer or ways to prevent it, talk to your doctor. Stay informed about the latest research. It's always a good idea.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive into how aspirin might prevent cancer metastasis. We hope this was helpful. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for tuning in to the Health Headliner podcast by To Digital. Like and subscribe for more health news and breakthroughs. Stay healthy and informed. See you next time.